Hello and welcome to Round Robin. I'm your host, Robin McCormick, and today we're going to learn a little more about a fairly rare but very serious disease called vasculitis. My guests are Dr. Kristi Mizelle and Greg Lesko. And I do want to say right from the outset, Greg is always here on the Round Robin show, but he's always behind the camera or in the sound booth. So this is a little bit special. Greg, how does it feel to be on this side of the microphone?
It feels very good. I've had the pleasure of doing this before, and thank you for having us on. I really appreciate this.
Well, thank you, and thank you, Dr. Mizelle, for coming.
Oh, you're welcome.
I am going to make you start with the personal side of the story, Greg, and tell us why you've gotten involved in vasculitis and your personal painful journey.
Thank you. Vasculitis is a disease that prior to 5 years ago I knew nothing about. But our youngest son, Mark, at age of 25, contracted symptoms of joint pain, sinusitis, earache, blurred, losing his vision, and just kind of figure what was going on. Turns out after months of diagnoses, which in many cases was not correct, he ended up with this disease called vasculitis, specifically a form of vasculitis called Wegener's granulomatosis. It is an autoimmune disease, and your body is fighting itself to heal. 69 days he was in the critical care unit up at MCV in Richmond, and good days, bad days, good days, bad days, but unfortunately he lost his fight with the disease March 8th of 2009. He was 25. Wife and I figured, well, we can either be angry or we can be angry and try to do something. So raising awareness of this disease that prior to our son getting sick was something we want to try to do so that others can get diagnosed early and hopefully avoid the trauma that we've been through.
It does sound like such a trauma, and it's so wonderful. And we'll get back a little bit more and talk about the support group and the foundation that you work with. But Dr. Mizelle, this is really a disease, I mean, until Greg, I had never heard of it. How common is it?
Well, vasculitis is a rare disorder, and it's usually treated by rheumatologists.
Of which you are one.
Of which I am one. But even within rheumatologists, not all rheumatologists are as familiar with it as others. I'm fairly familiar with it because part of my training at Johns Hopkins involved working specifically with vasculitis in the Vasculitis Center. So I'm probably a little bit more ready or aware to put the pieces together. But often it is a putting a puzzle together when making a diagnosis of vasculitis. So what vasculitis is a group of disorders. And there are quite a few within that group, but the main thing is inflammation of blood vessels is what unifies all of them. And it can be as a result of an infection, or it can be as a result of your body turning on itself, basically it being an autoimmune disease where your immune system is beginning to recognize parts of itself as foreign and sends the white blood cells, which are the soldiers, in to attack the foreign thing that's in the body. But unfortunately, it's actually part of your own body, and it shouldn't be doing that. So the problem is actually to calm down the immune system, and that is the treatment usually that's used.
So you suppress your own
You suppress your own immune system. And like Greg was mentioning earlier, there can be many different symptoms associated with vasculitis, and different types of vasculitis have different types of symptoms. So it can be difficult to put the pieces together.
Right, because sinusitis, I mean, I have that all the time, and aches and pains, and you start to think about all those things separately, and they don't add up to
and in a young
disorder.
man, you probably think it's something that's minor because they haven't had probably a lot of illness or anything before. But when people keep coming back to you with continued complaints, you have to escalate what you do to try to figure out what's going on. Oftentimes, there may be abnormalities in blood pressures because of the changes in the blood vessel linings themselves. There can be joint aches, there can be rashes, there can be sinus involvement, there can be lung involvement as well. People may have cough or shortness of breath. Kidneys can be involved in severe forms of vasculitis. And the other difficult thing about vasculitis is that it can range from very mild, self-limited disease to very rare and very serious and life-threatening. And so it's a spectrum of diseases, and so that can make diagnosis difficult. But if a young person or someone continues to come back to you, you have to keep searching until you can figure out what is going on.
Wow, that's just so complicated. And you went through that with not knowing what was going on.
And it wasn't until about 3 or 4 days into his hospitalization that they kind of narrowed it down, determined what he had by what he didn't have. And it was kind of a whittling away of symptoms like, now he can't have this, he can't have that. But aggressive treatment of steroids and chemo drugs is usually the treatment for this type of vasculitis. It was very, I wouldn't wish this on anybody. I really wouldn't.
Well, it was fairly sudden too, wasn't it? I mean, he had been very, very healthy.
About 6 months prior to him getting really sick, he was complaining of joint pain, and we were at a family gathering, and his eyes were just bloodshot and just like he had allergies to something we couldn't put the finger on.
Himself, basically.
Well, pretty much. That's what we later determined. And as a result, my wife and I, we formed a support group here in the Hampton Roads area. And I'm now on the board of directors of the Vasculitis Foundation, trying to raise awareness of this disease, because it's my belief that many people have this disease but don't know it.
So it is possible. Obviously, your son had a very severe and aggressive form of it, but it is possible to have a mild form that
Absolutely.
never, or at least not for a long time, gets diagnosed.
Absolutely, absolutely. So sometimes if it's in a reaction to medication, which is sometimes some of the cause, particularly with something called leukocytoclastic vasculitis, which is where just the skin is involved. It can be in reaction to an infection. Hepatitis B or hepatitis C sometimes can be associated with the vasculitis. So there are many causes that can kind of trigger or set this off, but the most common is an autoimmune process that's occurring. So absolutely.
And those autoimmune diseases, all of them are a little bit tricky. I mean, it takes a while to figure out that your body is reacting against itself, and then what's causing it or how to stop it.
You'd be surprised how many people live in the area that are living with vasculitis on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, well, let's talk numbers just a little bit then, because you say it is a rare disease, but you're finding enough people to have a support group.
Right, we were surprised by that, because they typically say vasculitis is so rare, it's about 1 in every 30,000. But at our first meeting that we reached out within an 80-mile radius of Hampton, as we got the list from the Vasculitis Foundation, we had 20 people. And 20 people in just this one area caught me by surprise. I'm like, if it's that rare, why do we have 20 people?
20 diagnosed people.
Diagnosed people, right. And some are in relapse, some are remission. But some are battling it every day, up and down. So it's a bit of an enigma, I call it, because it's a moving target. You don't know what to look for unless you're looking for it.
And so once you have this, you have it. Whatever has triggered this response in your body, you can get better.
So once again, the answer is not a straightforward answer.
There's different kinds.
There's different kinds. So in children, there's a certain type of vasculitis called Henoch-Schönlein purpura. But basically, typically that's self-limited, and it's in response to an infection that a child has had. But then there's other types of vasculitis where you may be treated and you never have a problem again. And then there's some where you can kind of have a relapsing remitting course where you have a flare, you treat the symptoms, things may go into remission for a while, and you may stay there, or you could come out of remission and go into active disease again. So it's something that once you have it, often you need to continue to be monitored.
Okay. All right, so let's just regroup. Do you want to tell us how we can get more information from your support group or from the foundation?
Go to www.vasculitisfoundation.org. There is more information there than you would ever care to look for. The Vasculitis Foundation is the only organization, international, that provides information, support, and research. And we just funded 5 fellowships last year to try to get boots on the ground, try to get physicians trained in vasculitis treatment and diagnosis. That's the key. There are various centers out there at Johns Hopkins and the Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, that are heavily involved in research. But the Vasculitis Foundation website lists all the chapters worldwide, And, or we can email us at HRVF chapter for Hampton Roads Vasculitis Foundation chapter
Gotcha.
at gmail.com.
Okay, and May is sort of the month that you try to highlight awareness, and red is your color. I know that you wear the pin pretty much every day.
I do
of
that
your
to
life.
honor our son, yes. Yeah, and May is Vasculitis Awareness Month, and we're hoping to open some eyes. If we affect one person, then our mission is complete.
Great. And Dr. Mizelle, we're very lucky to have you locally.
Thank you.
Because
I'm a
as you,
Suffolk girl.
yay, coming back home.
So I came back home, yes.
After your
After my training, yes.
Well, how did you, I mean, is it just because you're a rheumatologist that you got interested or involved in vasculitis, or it was because you were already at Johns Hopkins? I mean,
because I'm interested in rheumatology issues and autoimmune diseases in general, and vasculitis is one of those. And I was fortunate enough to do my training at a place that has a high focus on vasculitis. So I'm probably very attuned to thinking about that or catching the symptoms and putting them together. But it is it's like solving a puzzle, and so it's a very rewarding job, I believe, and I'm very excited to do it and to be here in Hampton Roads doing it.
That's wonderful. And I have to think, too, given those symptoms, it must even take a while sometimes to call in the rheumatologist.
Absolutely.
Because it isn't the first place you go
That's
for
right.
joint aches and sinusitis and skin rashes.
That's
you
right.
don't think blood disorder, autoimmune disease.
That's right.
So
your the initial doctors that you see have to think, oh, is there something else going on? Maybe we should call in a rheumatologist. So if any doctor has that thought, that it's better to call us in than not to.
That's right.
It's easier to say it's not there than to miss it and have the diagnosis be delayed.
That's great. Okay, well, thank you both very much for coming today. I know I've learned a lot about vasculitis, and we'll try to keep that in my mind.
Thank you.
And make sure that if we're getting treatment for something and it's one of those mystery diseases that is hard to diagnose, that you talk to your doctor, you think broadly, and you do bring in some specialists who can help. Rule something out is almost as valuable as ruling it back in. So thank you for watching.